Now we are recording.
Ah, yes, now it's official.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll get started here. So we're going to have a presentation by the famous Daniel Ewart of Vineyard Haven, Shellfish Constable for how many years now?
Oh my goodness. In Tisbury, like this will be my 16th year
Wow,
for the town of Tisbury.
wow.
I
What
know, right?
you did this before that? Somebody put someplace else?
Yes. I was working as an assistant and then deputy shellfish constable in Oak Bluffs. I also worked at the shellfish hatchery too.
Oh yeah, I guess
So,
I knew that.
yeah.
But for those of us that don't know, now they know.
Yes.
All right, well we're going to look into the municipal agriculture in Tisbury. So
All right.
take it away.
Hi guys. So like Richard was saying, I've been the shellfish constable for the last 16 years in Vineyard Haven for the town of Tisbury. And prior to that, I was working in Oak Bluff. So, we here's some of the techniques that we'd use. Just so you know, I presented this presentation last week at NACE, the Northeast Aquaculture Conference and exposition. So I did that. There was over 750 attendants. Um, they didn't all sit in on my presentation because there was like six different presentations going at the same time.
Oh, I
There
hate
was
that.
like six of them at the same time, and then like there was a lot going on. This was in Portland, Maine, and also the Milford Aquaculture Seminar. They hold that every 2 years. And Aiden, my deputy, did a poster. I'm not going to share that with you unless you want me to. I can try. I don't have it. Actually, I can't. I don't have it on this computer. I'm sorry. Because it's not my computer. I forgot. Anyway,
But I can attach it and send it to you.
yeah, we can attach it later. All right, so a look into municipal aquaculture. These are some of the things that I do in Tisbury. So, oh gosh, I'm not very skilled with this, sorry. So Tisbury has over 6 miles of coastline on the northern side of Martha's Vineyard. Two main coastal ponds, Tashmoo, roughly 269 acres, and the lagoon is 537. We have about 300, a little over 300 of those acres in Tisbury. We also have an active harbor. Um, The Shellfish Department's role is to provide supervisory, technical, administrative, and laboring work in the protection and expansion of the local shellfish populations and enforcement of all applicable laws and regulations pertinent to shellfish protection and propagation, and also maintenance of facilities and related to shellfish. So we have a small but dedicated team. And we work with the Martha's Vineyard Shellfish Group that provides quahogs, bay scallops, and now some oysters to us annually. And uh, if you know me, I'm very thrifty, but I try to work as green as possible with gear. And this is important for the economy, for sustenance. It's also very culturally and ecologically important for all the work that we do. So, quahogs. So you can see when we get the quahogs, in order for us to do what we do and get the seed from the shellfish hatchery, we locally harvest the brood stock. There I am with one quahog rake full of little necks and everything that we will bring over to the shellfish hatchery. Once they are put in these tanks and they're conditioned at the shellfish group for a while. And then when they're ready to spawn, they put them in the Pyrex dishes. And as you can see, um, we have some, I don't know what the other town says, but there's definitely one from Vineyard Haven that was spawning in here. They'll mix the sperm and the eggs and they'll let them set out on, they'll put them in these giant vats almost, and then they'll set them out onto mesh. And then when we get them, this is what they look like. This last picture over here, about 1 millimeter in size. It looks like a bag of sand, truthfully. So once we get them, Next picture. We have to put them somewhere. So what do? We're building rafts. So we build our quahog rafts. As you can see, we use, 4x8 sheets of plywood with 2x6 frames. May look like a lot, and they're pretty heavy, but we can get it done, just a couple of us. It's not a big problem. We changed up our gear a little bit. We used to use billets. So foam billets that were made out of styrofoam and sandwiched between two pieces of plywood that was tied down and tied to the rafts. But we went with A3 poly balls instead, and this provides us enough support for floating them in the water. And we use simple methods. Here I am in the bottom here. We're just, we drill holes onto the side so we can attach the buoys. We use figure eights so we can untie them if necessary. And then, if anything should happen, we can get out there and fix what we need. So I did a little cost estimate analysis in 2024. How much would it cost to make a new raft? Approximately $305. And that's with like all new line, bottom paint, that's everything included. In this past year, we usually have 20 to 23 quahog rafts out. But last year, this past summer, we did 32. And, if you think about it, we usually do 100,000 per raft because we get over 2 million. So like 100,000 and 20 rafts is 2 million. So if we do over 2 million, then we'll have, 20 plus rafts out. So we did our experiment with densities this year. I don't have that data with me. It's still crunching the numbers with the shellfish group. But we seeded them out instead of densities of 100,000, which I'll show you. We did them at like, 25,000, 50,000. But anyway, so the reason why we put the floats on here is to keep them off the bottom. We don't want them sitting on the bottom. We don't want the crabs to get in there. We don't want, any other predators besides us to really get in there. But sometimes it's not always easy. So here, once we get them in the water, which that last shot before, let me go back one. We're floating them out. We tied them to the back of the boat and we're floating them out to where we want to. And then now we're shoveling sand onto the culling board. We used to use buckets. So we changed it up and we used to dump 8 buckets worth of sand in each raft. We don't do that anymore because we don't want to break our backs. Shoveling is just way easier for us. We'll just pull up alongside of the beach, shovel that sand right up onto the culling board. One culling board is approximately 2 rafts. We tie them together, so we get 2 done at a time. And I also changed up the fact that I used to go out after I get my seed and put the date on there. No longer do that. We numbered them before. It just makes more sense. It's easier. So there's Fred. He's got approximately 400,000 seed in his hands there. So how do we put them out? We either like pull up alongside of the raft on a calm day and we'll spread them out throughout the raft. We'll let them sink down naturally and make sure that they all sink, or I'll dive in and snorkel right on them and plant them that way. So during the summer, we check on our rafts quite often. And after, oh, I hit the button. Sorry. I didn't know it was a touch screen. So anyway, after a productive summer of them growing, we'll start to sieve them out. In the first picture, you see Freddie and Martha, who worked for the department for like one summer. We had a trash pump. That's what you see her holding, and we were sieving them to size. But like I said, too much gear, just more stuff to keep track of. And then when you get down there, you're like, oh, I forgot a piece. So it just made it a little bit harder to like get what you needed to get done, setting up and setting up took longer. So now we just grab shovels and a giant sieve that you can see in the middle picture. This is us helping Aquina with their quahog raft. They were experimenting with some quahogs. So we just pull the raft up onto the beach, pretty much where we shoveled the sand, and we'll lighten the load we'll get it in as close as possible, shovel the sand, and then we'll sieve the quahogs to size. As you can see in that last picture, they're picking out some of the crabs or whatever that might have gotten in there from when we hauled it in, or taking out any of the other stuff that's growing in there. And there on the bottom, you can see some of the quahogs. So our goals for our quahog rafts are, of course, high survival, good growth in a short amount of time. So we want our quahogs to grow as large as possible. But reality, we don't always have that. We have issues with boats, predators, harmful algal blooms, gear failure. So boats can come and rock our gear. Even with our modified changes, the rafts are not quite as stable as with the foam billets because we do use the poly balls, but it does allow more light to get in there. So they're not growing under shaded areas at any one time. So and it's easier for us to get a good look in there because we've opened up a lot of that area so we can see into the raft by using the poly balls. Yeah, sometimes you're going to get predators. You're going to get blue crabs. Sometimes you'll see other crabs crawling up the line because we attach them to an anchor and they could crawl up there. So that's why it's so important that we check on them. And then I see chemicals because of location. This year we put some near the seeker and we noticed that the ones near closer to the seeker didn't grow as well as the ones that were just further away, and they were from the same batch of shellfish that we received from the hatchery. Geez.
Why do you think that is?
Just whatever is leaching from the bottom paint or whatever. There's no I didn't do any chemical analysis, but I'm thinking something is definitely changed. I don't know whether it's, flow, because that is an obstacle there.
Mm-hmm.
So could it be change of flow? It was just over another 20 feet from, or maybe it was 50 feet. I'm really bad at gauging. It's over another 50 feet from where those rafts were, but we did notice that there was some size difference. As you guys don't know which ones were which, but we have a picture and it was so we have a couple with 50,000 and, A and 9. They both, we noticed differences between the two. And there's a cullen board. Once we get them out, we'll go over to flats and we'll spread them out from the boat. Some areas we'll get out of the boat and we'll walk around on the flats over in Tashmoo to see those out too. And yeah, like I said, it's very important to check our gear. Bay scallops. So bay scallops generally done similar way. If the shellfish hatchery needs broodstock, they'll get it from all island towns and they'll ask us. So we'll go out and we'll drag for bay scallops. We also drag for some bay scallops and we put them into spawning cages. You can see the middle picture there is a spawning cage. I call it your little Hotel California because they can check out. Oh, sorry.
No, I got it.
They can check out anytime they want, but they can never leave until I take them out. So it's just their little B&B. They're in there getting food and they're filtering the water. Later on, we'll tie on mesh bags with more mesh on them just to gauge how their spawning event does. So like the last couple years, we've noticed that it wasn't a great spawning event in the lagoon. And so it's just another way for us to gauge like what's happening. And we'll talk to other constables about this too. But the brood stock that goes to the hatchery, they'll put in the Pyrex dishes. They'll do the same thing. They'll put them in there with salt water, and then they'll heat them up on the table using fresh water to either warm them up with hot water and then cool them down.
To force the spawn.
To get them to spawn, creating that like, ooh, it's cold, it's hot, it's cold, it's hot, I gotta go. And then when we get them, you can see in that last picture there, they'll start to put them into these little dumplings. They'll put them onto pieces of gauze or burlap. They've done all different kinds of things. A little scoop here, about a couple thousand to 5,000 in each scoop. I mean, it's really small.
Now, are the, I guess, gametes from all the island scallops combined so that you get a genetic, or do they only do Tisbury scallops?
Oh,
Just
no.
scallops? Just
They
everybody?
ask
Crazy?
for a bunch of brood stock from island towns, and then they'll mix them all together.
Oh, good.
So it's why is it not going now? That's weird.
Do you want to make that tiny?
How do I? It's not allowing me to click on the next slide. Oh, okay. There we go. That's what I did. Sorry, guys.
Oops, hang on.
Don't close that. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Perfect.
Sorry, she was seeing all of you and she had to keep scooting you around.
Yeah.
I just made you tiny.
So from the hatchery, we get our seed bundled up. It's in the paper bag. Everything we use is pretty green. It's recyclable, everything from the tissue to even to the ties. So we usually get about 50, 100 at a time. And then we'll carefully place the bundles in each spat bag, twist the little ties onto the netron. We have netron inside there, tie them onto a long line with buoys, and we'll float them out there. And location is key. The reason why is we don't want the buoy, the bag sitting on the bottom at low tide. Once they start to get heavy, that'll increase the amount of predation in there. But it's very important for us to keep going out there and checking the bags, because they will start to grow quickly. Within a couple weeks, you're going to need to change them. And this last year, we got over 900 bags of scallops out there.
Wait a second before you flip on.
Yeah.
How many, on this slide here, how many babies are on each of those little tissues?
Oh, so in each one is about 2,000 to 5,000.
Wow.
I don't have a super accurate count, but we do that's what we approximate. That's fine.
All right. And the bags, how often did they follow?
Foul up?
Yes.
Well, it depends. It definitely depends on the area, because certain areas will get fouled more than others. Usually where there's you'll see it too in the water. Further up the pond, you might see more fouling when the current starts to slow down a little bit, because they have more time to settle in. The mesh creates a great habitat for them to grow and allows like smaller particles of food to enter, so they're not being bombarded with all kinds of things. But the problem with these bags we'll also see other species growing in there, because like most everything, there's a lot of stuff in the water that is a zooplankton. There's a lot of phytoplankton, but there's a lot of zooplankton. And then the zooplankton will get caught in there and start to grow. And then we got to make sure that those crabs that are in there get out. Because it's like,
crab.
it's a buffet for them. So yeah. And then you can see like the how small those little scallops are, all those little black dots on the last picture. Those are little scallops. So they're microscopic when we get them. And then here's like I said, our goal is to get our seed as large as possible for better survival and to boost the natural population. Even though we get them from the hatchery, it's really just like wild broodstock. It's made up of all the island broodstock scallops. There's Fred seeding them out. That's what we do. We spread them out throughout the pond in areas. We don't want to get too shallow. The wind already takes care of that for us. However, like some of the seed can be hard for people to distinguish once it's scallop season. That's our problem. We want it large, but not too large where it's hard. There's got to be like, because I'm teaching a lot of people like what not to pick up.
The scallops only last for 2 years, their span, right?
Generally, yeah. So their first year, even though like all this picture of my hand there, that's all seed, and it looks like we have like a couple different sizes. They generally will live, they're generally gonna not make it past their third year. However, they could get a second spawn. So their first year is basically all growth, and then their second year will be put into also developing that gonad and releasing their sperm and eggs because they have both sperm and eggs. So, the hard part is once we seed them out, that's where they're gonna stay, unless they get blown up on the beach, and then we have to deal with that. So those are some of the issues too. Yeah, so we leave them to Mother Nature.
Why would they have two spawns?
Why would they spawn again?
Just climate conditions or?
Oh,
And is that a viable spawn? Do they live?
sometimes, depending on when they are born, say they got a late spawn. So a late spawn, they were born or they were created in October. So then they were not sexually mature until later on. They need that time. So sometimes you'll see a late spawn. Sometimes you'll see a super early spawn. But generally it's around the middle of June is when we'll see that. So the last picture, there I am. I counted a bunch of scallops. I can't tell you how many are in each pile. We would, and we sometimes would take that out and we'll put them into fresh bags and let them grow larger, or we'll spread them out. So next. Enter. Why is it not going? There we go. Oysters. We did a little experiment in late 2021. We received about 2,000 oysters from the shellfish group. As an experiment, we placed them in the bottom cages in the lagoon and we let them grow. Little attention. We would take them out every 6 months and make sure that they were still alive. Take out the dead ones, kind of clean them up a little bit, put them back, and change out the bags. But we were able to have our first oyster day where people could harvest. It was done down in the lagoon family shellfish area in conjunction with Nina at the Martha's Vineyard Shellfish Group. Yep, I got it.
Yeah.
So
That's exciting.
Yeah, it
So
was
how did the
exciting.
oysters do in lagoon?
They did okay. I mean, like, we didn't see too much death. They were put in a good place. So there was definitely decent oxygen at the bottom. We put them just off of Hines Point, like towards the bridge, in between the bridge and Hines Point. And they did all right. There's our All About Oysters Day. And we're gonna do the same thing. We're working with 50,000 seed over in Tashmoo as well. And we put them in this floating cage and they're doing great.
Plus,
Yep.
When
So
when
what's
do
next?
when do
Yes.
oysters start to grow together? You know, you talk about an oyster bar or whatever, and how does that happen?
You mean like an oyster reef?
Yeah, I mean, I got an oyster yesterday, and there was two of them stuck together. I mean, growing together, and I couldn't break them apart. I had to open them, you know. But
It's like usually like how they set. So when, you know, we got singles from the hatchery means that they're, they're individual. But sometimes like when they're small, if they need that calcium to set on. So the hatchery does use eggshell to like so they're able to set on little tiny pieces of egg.
Hmm.
So then they'll start to grow. And I think Emma's on here and she could probably
Yeah,
answer that a little bit better than me.
yeah, well just that
But
in the wild, the larvae are setting onto oysters that are still alive. So then they're
Mhm.
actually building off of that, or they're setting on like big pieces of shell. So then they make these mounds or like big clusters. And yeah, in the hatchery we also do spat on shell. In Sedgwick and Tackett on the Oak Bluff side, it is possible at some point you could come across actually clusters that were produced by the shellfish group. Um, but typically, right, as Danny's saying, is like anyone who's farming or trying to put these oysters and keep them in bags, they're usually singles. So they're purposely set on tiny, tiny pieces of shell. So they create single oysters. Sometimes they're doubles. And but if they're crowded in a bag, they can kind of like reattach. They don't reattach, but they kind of can grow into each other, but that's a little bit different. I hope that helps.
and do you try and break them apart?
A farm
Me?
a farmer would try to break them apart. If they ended up with like doubles, they would try to break them apart because I can't sell them as two.
Right.
Um, but the way that, nature originally intended it to be, they would be in these clusters because that's also how the little ones are more protected when they're growing in this like jumbly way with the bigger ones. They're harder for the crabs to eat.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, so great question. But what's next for the Tisbury Shellfish Department? We're trying to keep our fisheries as abundant as possible. I even got a call from or a text from one of my fishermen today saying, "Where can I go? Or how can I get a license back in Vineyard Haven? Because I really, really want to go cohogging there." And I'm like, because he just moved to Eggertown. I was like, I got to get back to him and tell
That's me.
him that Eggertown has a lot of shellfish too. So don't. Oh, there he is.
It's
Oh my goodness, Ray.
Ray.
I didn't know who it was on here. I was like, oh shoot. So
That's
anyway,
me.
I called you out. So our goals are basically we're going to try to increase our public outreach. Um, I'd say we're trying to build an upweller. We're going to build an upweller with Eggertown, and we're going to continue to educate ourselves on new technologies,
Can
but
you
also
just
try to
explain
keep better numbers.
what's an upweller?
An upweller is basically a piece of equipment that we could use to put our little seed in instead of like putting them into the bags or into the rafts. We have we have an upweller. It's basically to allow the flow and it's to go through. It basically has this, oh my goodness, this upwelling from down below. So we get nutrient rich food from below and they're on mesh, so they will grow faster. It's just another piece of equipment that we could put in our toolbox so we could grow shellfish to a larger size without the hassles of having to go through and, because it's very tedious, all those bags to do that. Or maybe we can get a jump start on our cohogs too, and also our oysters. So it's a very useful piece of equipment.
can you tell me how an upweller works?
Yes.
Like, how does the water upwell? Is there a pump? Is there
Well, there's different ones. This one would be a tidal upweller, similar to like what Eggertown has. Exactly what Eggertown has. We're copying everything about that.
Mhm.
So the water it allows the water to flow through. You put them in a place where, has a lot of
Circulation.
tidal range, so the water will flow through the bins and allows the shellfish to grow. And
But
also there's a Flubsy upweller which has a pump and needs electricity, or you could have it solar, but it has a pump and it pushes the water through out the trough, and then the water has to equalize. So there's mesh on these trays. It's basically a trough with trays. Water from below will come up. So it's constantly flowing through.
Must keep them cleaner.
Well,
theoretically.
yeah.
Has anyone come to, especially if you've come to the old lobster hatchery and seen the way the shellfish group grows shellfish in those in these deep round bins. We have a lot of jargon, so we're using words like trough and bins and stuff, and it's hard without pictures. But we do a lot of land-based upwellers, but it's the same concept that just forces. And so Danny's saying there's tidals, there's floating upwellers, which use a pump and electricity, and then there's these land-based ones, which of course use electricity as well. And so they're all different, but the whole premise is so that the water has to flow up. They're the upwelling, up through the shellfish, and theoretically carry away some of the waste. And you can just move more water and therefore deliver more wild food from the water across the shellfish, this little like pad of shellfish babies, than you can if you were going the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the hatchery, we
Thank
have
you,
both
Emma.
downwellers and upwellers.
Huh.
Yeah, thank you, Emma, for that.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of industry talk.
Okay, we can ask questions. I do want you to cover if there was anything really new and exciting at that conference that you just went to. And maybe
New and
folks can add- I
exciting.
don't know if there was some like wow, or if there was like, oh my God, all the shellfish are dying or everywhere, or were there any key takeaways?
No, I mean, like, it was a great event. Emma was there, of course, and I think maybe we heard more about some new and exciting ways that we could help keep our shellfish clean. I don't know if Emma wants to mention that, but
Wow, it was so like the first day there were 7 concurrent sessions. There was almost 700 people there.
yeah.
It was so big. And what was really cool about the conference is that there was every single type of topic was covered. There was stuff about regulations and permitting type stuff and and I think there was a session on like crop insurance for farmers, and there's also all kinds of genetics and um oh, I would say one of the stuff about sea urchins, which was really cool.
Mhm.
So I heard the talk by our collaborators at Stony Brook. Danny, did you make those two? I think there were 2 in a row. And so we've been working with Stony Brook University on bay scallop,
Yep.
on the bay scallop parasite stuff. And so this isn't centered on in Tisbury or Oak Bluffs, but the Shellfish Group's been working with Stony Brook and bringing some seed from New York lines to Menamsha Pond, and then also sending Martha's Vineyard scallops to the Peconic Bay, and they've been trialing them and testing them for this kidney parasite. And they're such great presenters, and they're doing all kinds of amazing work, and they've got more funding to do the next levels of it. But the take home was that the vineyard scallops are actually doing really well. So I don't know. So on one hand, I guess some of us, I was hoping a little bit that this parasite is the reason why we have fewer bay scallops than we used to. It might be. But compared to the scallops in New York, the vineyard bay scallops are are surviving so much better both here and in New York. So it seems that we have better genetic diversity. So at least that doesn't help us solve any problems right this second. But for me, it's hopeful that at least it means that our populations have like flexibility and some resiliency to hopefully continue to like fight this parasite, because they are getting the parasite. They're just not dying from it as much. So yay, we have healthy bay scallops, even though we don't have as many of them as we wish we did.
Right.
I thought that was
Yeah, some of the other talks that I went to were about, pollution, and I saw this one where instead of using, because they've been experimenting trying to make buoys, use less plastic, make buoys out of mushrooms, which is it's a lot. They're really heavy. They disintegrate really quickly, relatively quickly, a lot faster than plastic. And then they were making like styrofoam containers. It was a woman, I can't remember exactly. I don't have my book with me, but she made them out of shells from lobster shells and some kind of polymer to make like styrofoam, which I think is really cool and sounds like it could be applicable for us and green crabs and spider crabs and whatever else. So,
those alternative plastic talks. That was one of my favorites 2 years ago.
mm-hmm.
They did a series of a couple of those. So that's really really cool that there is research being done, because aquaculture and fishing does use a lot of plastic. And when it's not single-use plastic, they're used over and over, and when they're handled responsibly, they don't usually end up in the water, but it's still, an excessive use of plastic. So there's a lot of research being done to find alternatives, and that's really cool. Nantucket shellfish hatchery and like shellfish department experimented with some of those mushroom buoys like a couple
yeah?
years ago. Yeah.
Cool.
So you could
How
always,
did they do?
I think they did okay, but they needed to be cycled out more often because they got like
They got,
water, they got waterlogged or something. So they still had to
yeah,
be painted with like anti-fouling paint, and then they had to be cycled in and out. So they're a little bit of a pain,
yeah,
but it just kind of comes with like what we will have to do in order to reduce plastic. We've learned how to bring our bags to the grocery store,
yeah.
with fewer plastic,
One of the commercial fishermen up in Maine, she was coming up with aluminum cages instead of the plastic coated cages, and then it would have to have like a zinc or something.
Yep.
And like metal bags, and there's also another great company that had a plastic free, I can't remember the name of it, plastic free bags that they could sell their shellfish in. It could also be used
Yep.
for all kinds of different applications.
Yeah, they're working on other like mesh bags that, we call them onion bags, but like what the farmers all sell their oysters in, and they're plastic, and they usually just get thrown away. The Shellfish Group has been working with a bunch of restaurants and collecting those bags that normally just get thrown away, and then getting them to the beach befrienders. So at least then they get used as trash bags again and get, another use out of them. But Edgartown Shellfish, because they do oyster giveaways out of Sedgwick and Tackett in the wintertime to the senior centers, they are going to be trying to use these non-plastic. They're made out of, cotton and other biodegradable, natural fibers. So that was positive.
There were so many talks, it was hard for everybody to get to all of them.
I know.
There's whole sections about kelp, and then there's like whole sections about like hatchery procedures. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Does anybody else have a question?
Yeah. Does anybody
I
else
have
have a
another
question?
one, but I'll let you guys first.
What?
John does.
John
John?
does.
Unmute.
You muted. Nope. John, you're muted.
It should be like on the
Bottom left.
bottom of your,
Bottom left.
you can type it in if you want. I don't know how to. Oh, can we unmute them?
I can't. We have the power.
Oh. Oh.
Well, while we're waiting for John, this is Martha from the Friends of Farm Pond, and I would love to get together and talk with you about Farm Pond sometime. I'm out in San Diego in a class, so I just wanted to say hello.
Okay.
Hey, hi Martha. I haven't seen you in a while.
There on,
Yeah.
John.
There you go. There's John.
There we go.
So yeah, sorry about that. My computer was frozen up for a strange reason, so I couldn't access the screen to do anything.
Used to be.
Hi, everybody. Manuel, that's a great, Danielle, that's a great talk. Thank you. It's inspiring to know that all this work is being done and paying off. I'm confident that in the past, the work was done to, as it were, justify what you're doing, but I wonder whether you ever replicate it to demonstrate what the default would be without the benefit of all the enhancement work that you're doing for the shellfish populations. So, whether there's like an experimental area where you might monitor shellfish density and size distribution, where you don't seed, that's far enough away that it wouldn't benefit from the seeding that you do, or just some way of having data available to reinforce to any skeptic the necessity as well as the utility of what you're doing.
That's a good question. Now it would be a lot for us. Like I said, it's a small team. I think this is more of a question for like a grad student to help us out with. We could look at some areas that I don't monitor or I don't seed, and then maybe compare them with where areas where I do. But also, that's something I can look at. I mean, I'd have to make sure that the areas are pretty similar with flow and everything. I know for sure, we've been seeding. We have a family area in the lagoon with quahogs, and we've been seeding that for quite some time. And yeah, Ray's a huge fan of it. He was in there
Who's
like
the-
once a week.
I
I
don't,
told Rob about you, Ray.
and I don't think that any of the departments have purposely done that. It sounds like a really good idea, John, like you said, to prove, because we do get the question all the time of, does this work? Is this working? Or the question of, what would it be like if the towns weren't doing this? And so it might be something that would be really worthwhile, but it also would mean you'd have to pick two spots that were equal at the beginning, not seed one of them, seed the other one, but then do you let people fish it? Because if it's getting seeded, then it also gets fished. So
Yeah, there's
it
a
would
lot.
it would be a very good dissertation for somebody if someone wants a degree.
Right. I don't deny that it is infinitely easier to pose this question than to address
To
it.
answer it.
But it occurred to me that if somebody said, well, why are you spending all this money? Is it really necessary? To have an ironclad, robust response might actually also facilitate your efforts by increasing the investment behind it. So,
Yeah.
Well, there's also the question of, the value of what's harvested. I mean, you guys keep track of how many permits you put
Yeah.
out, but then you don't always know, when people have taken stuff. But it'd be interesting to put a price tag on all, when you go to the fish market to buy one oyster, what are you paying? $1, $2? So, there's a lot of economic benefit.
Well, actually, that's so funny because every time I do my yearly report, I put commercial harvest, recreational harvest. These are now approximations. They're not like hard numbers of like, we keep track, we keep a book, but it's generally like what we get. And then we use the economic multiplier for the commercial fishermen, which is 3.5. So we multiply how much they catch by how much it is a pound by the economic multiplier and how important the resource is to the community, because that money gets circulated through the community like 3.5 times when you support your local fishermen.
And that 3.5, Danny, that's from Division Marine Fisheries, right?
Correct.
And I feel like I remember hearing Paul Bagnall say that he applied that number to the recreational fishery as well, because they are also, which you could argue, but they're also buying waders and buying coolers and buying gear. And um, even if it means that they're saving money by not, say, buying those cohogs from the fish market, now they're spending that money in another part of the economy. Um, if they're using a boat, they're buying fuel
Yep.
and using the services of one of the marinas and all those good things. So, and that's another thing that it's hard to have a really good handle on because you can measure it in these different ways, but um, it's definitely it has a really big economic impact for sure.
And the other thing that I don't think a lot of people are aware of is that shellfish clean the water.
Oh, they certainly do.
And adding an economic value to that is even
Oh,
harder.
that would be really hard, but
The cost of doing nothing, or I feel like it was the Cape Cod Commission, I would have heard it in one of these meetings, 10 years ago or something, did try to do a study, and they decided something like every certain amount the water quality degraded, property values went down. So, and you can totally conceptualize that. The reason why people come here for all these reasons, and some of those reasons are being able to go into the water and harvest their food, which is something you can't do easily in a lot of places. But yeah, putting a dollar figure on that, a value is really hard.
it isn't just the fact that they can get shellfish or fish. Some people just want to go to a clean beach and go
Yep.
in the water and not have to. I mean, we've had some scares where people have gotten sick from going swimming and, they didn't know it was so bad.
Yep.
So those shellfish do that. I read an interesting thing this morning, and it's kind of funny that I read it this morning. Did you know that Boston Harbor has been closed to shellfishing since 1920? And
Mm-hmm.
they just reopened it.
Yep.
They just
I heard that.
reopened it.
I just heard this on NPR just yesterday.
Yep,
Mhm.
that's why.
Was it specifically like Hingham? Maybe it was out of Hingham or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not all of it, but a good
Sure.
chunk of it.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. And that's because of the money they've spent cleaning up the water.
It's important.
Super important. And the clean salt water flex clean fresh water. They're not
Mhm.
separate.
Yeah.
I'm wondering to what extent, I mean, it's marvelous that this conference occurs and that you all were able to be there. Um, but is there an alliance or a coordinated body of um, uh, your colleagues who are doing this elsewhere? So, for example, you can compare notes easily with people involved with, for example, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and everything else going on there, where I mean, it's a much bigger, more complicated thing because there are three states involved and so on.
Yeah.
There are other meetings like the National Shell Fisheries Association meeting, and then there's also really big, I was just trying to rattle them off yesterday, the big estuary research. Like there's the New England Estuarine Research Society, which is NEARS, and then there's the American Estuarine Research Federation or something like that. There's a whole bunch of those. So and then Restore America's Estuaries is a huge conference. I think honestly it happens like every other year. So again, there are these conferences on like all these different scales. And so sure, that is an opportunity. But definitely, I mean, I think you can kind of feel from the responses from Danny and I, this conference was actually even so big that it was hard to even wrap your head around what we saw and what we heard. And there were so many options. So it's not really like we didn't really get to necessarily talk to all of the people to compare all of our notes. So it is really hard. But there's also listservs. There's a number of listservs that, I mean, Danielle and them are on the Massachusetts Shellfish Officers Association. So that's just for Massachusetts. But at least it's so that shellfish constables around the state can compare these notes. And I listened to their talk. Somebody asked a question the other day about the way they do certain types of permitting, and they can all chime in and and there's other things for shellfish and for aquaculture.
And certainly here, we have the Martha's Vineyard Shellfish Group, which all the shellfish constables are a part of, along with a representative from each town. So we have that as well.
So if I may, related to this, given where we are now as compared to, let's say, 13 months ago, the EPA had a dedicated program, and I'm wondering what the changes in federal government structure, staffing, and funding um, have meant, or you think might mean to you, and whether people are looking into alternatives or replacement systems from perhaps foundations or others to make up for what might be lost. But presumably there's also just a loss. I know in what I'm involved in, which is international wildlife conservation and so on. I mean, the structural changes, staffing losses, loss of money. No money was allocated at all last year for federal funds for international conservation that were all set to go ahead. So there've been enormous impact, and I'm wondering how that's been for aquaculture and so on.
I think as far as grant funding, I think we're about to see a little bit more of it. Some more of these changes in funding. At least the towns, work off of town money. The larger town operations, sure, do get some of these like state and federal funds. The Shellfish Group doesn't get a ton of federal money, but it does change the way that grant money flows from the feds through the states to, and trickles down. I would say at this meeting, there were a few people from federal offices that weren't there. I know of one gentleman I can think of from the Connecticut Milford Lab who took a retirement package. But I think that aquaculture is just really interesting. It's food. It exists in both red and blue places. The environmental aspects of it, I think under this current administration are being challenged. But the food part of it is still valued. But so I don't know. I guess I feel like I don't feel like there have been like really, really massive changes right now, but it's certainly like not over. And something did happen recently where you probably saw this. There was a big news blast went out about a salmonella outbreak attached to raw oysters. And that came from the CDC. And the shellfish industry lost their minds because it was such a mischaracterization. This outbreak did not fit the definition of what an outbreak is in the shellfish sanitation. They have a whole acronym, and they're a whole consortium and department, of that take care of shellfish sanitation issues having to do with human health. And so, I mean, that's an example where changes at the CDC type level resulted in all this terrible publicity for oysters, which wasn't accurate. So that's the kind of thing that could have real lasting harm on the industry because of chaos.
Well, the Trump administration is trying to deny climate change. And one of the things that probably came up at your conference, and we know it's happening here, is not rising sea level, rising of the temperature of the water.
Yep.
It's totally destroyed the coral reefs. I just came back from Virgin Islands, and there's really nothing left. I mean, the old ones are just crumbling up and washing up on the beach. It's just disgusting. And that's another thing, just like oyster reefs, that protect the land.
And so in that denial, it could make funding these projects harder if we can't talk about that. Right. And we do have colleagues who at the EPA and at every, state and Fed associated level who have been told they can't use those words. They can't use the words climate change. They can't use the words, diversity and inclusion. But those people are so determined to do their work. They're finding all the ways to continue to do the work, even if it sounds just a little bit different. Like we know what our assignment is, and they know what their assignment is. So I think that I heard one of these people speak, and they were like, "Do not give in.
Right.
Keep doing the work."
Right.
And so I think, and like it was like super inspirational. This was like last year, and I think that we just hope that we will prevail. And so there is harm being done though, that like on the levels of say like graduate students coming up, if those graduate research, isn't being funded, then we could end up losing like a cohort, half a generation of scientists. So I guess we'll just see, but we're hoping that we're resilient. And
Let's hope so. Has this conference been held like yearly, or is it something that's relatively new?
No, it's been going on for a long time now. I believe with the Milford Aquaculture Seminar, it's been going on since 2006 congruently, but it's like every other year.
yeah, so this big one happens every other year. And then on the off years, it's the Milford Aquaculture Seminar, which is very, very small. They used to operate separately.
Yeah.
And the Milford meeting's been going on since, I don't know, Rick Carney talks about being at the very first one and being the young guy in the back of the room and it being like 20 people in someone's office. And so that was, the mid to late 70s. But this is the biggest one yet. Like it just keeps growing.
Great.
I like that it's every other year because it is a lot.
It is a lot.
And there's a lot of other meetings to go to. And to like, John, where you kind of asked about like comparing notes and like linking up with people in other regions, the Virginia aquaculture has a really good meeting. I went to it once when I was in Jersey because I was in graduate school. But so there are other opportunities if you feel like it. And at NACE, there was a one from Florida, one of like a colleague of Rick's from Florida who came all the way to Maine just to hear something, catch up with old friends and hear what's going on in the Northeast.
Oh, that's great. All right. Anybody else have questions or want to mention anything?
I had one question and Sakiko was on and I was hoping that she would be here for this, but can't oyster reefs like protect the coast? Like putting out oyster balls and putting oysters on it. I'm thinking like Senji, it's
So
off of James Pond. It's like that, there's like no hope to keep that serpentine little cut open.
yeah.
So I was like, was there any way to break the wave action like with oyster reefs or something, or is that just not looked at anymore?
It totally is. My response to that on the Vineyard, and maybe I could be wrong or something will change that I'll be proven wrong. But out here, you could put out these reef balls. They did that. They did this on Nantucket. Tons and tons and tons of permitting through like Army Corps and but they put out these where there were oyster castles or reef balls, whatever they were, these big concrete structures. And you can, if they're smaller, you can seed them with baby oysters in the hatchery. The big things you can't really because you need like a crane to pick them up and move them. But then they're only places that we get wild oyster recruitment, like wild baby oysters growing, naturally adding to the system is in the Great Ponds. So anywhere else, even, the lagoon, we know we have a lot of oyster drills. Senjikataket doesn't seem to have much for oyster drills. I think I've heard a few observations that maybe there are a few. But so there aren't apparently oyster drills, but there still isn't wild recruitment. If you think about the Eggertown has been growing 500,000 oysters in Senji for, I don't know, over 10 years now.
Mhm.
And rarely do you see a baby oyster on the bottom of anyone's boat or on a buoy, or I know there aren't a lot of docks in Senji and things like that. You don't find them on the rocks. So if you were to put these structures out, they wouldn't naturally recruit new oysters. Therefore, they're just concrete balls and castles and, looking like Lego blocks. So
Why do
on
you
the
think they wouldn't recruit them? There's just not out there. Oh, the salinity. I'm sorry.
the
Salinity, predators.
it's something about this. It's some yeah, the salinity, changes the predator assortment. There's no like oyster drills, for example, don't like lower salinity, and that's why there's no oyster drills in Edgartown and Tisbury Great Pond or Chilmar Pond. Um, but it's also about like flushing rate. So anywhere where that's very oceanic, there's just like too much dilution, and the larvae just like float away, and they don't get a chance to recruit to those structures. So
Okay.
that's why somehow it seems to work in other places very adjacent to us, but I don't think that it would really work here on the vineyard in these places. Um, yeah. And,
Okay.
cohogs and scallops are good for all the other things. They filter the water and they feed people and they support the ecosystem, but they don't create that structure that oysters can.
Right. Okay. I was just, I'm always like,
Yeah, I
always looking for
wish.
things to save the salt marshes.
I know.
Well, that's another issue, the salt salinity. What's everybody's reaction to the breach being opened out there at on South Beach, and then now the water's flowing through Edgartown Harbor. Is that good or bad for all those shellfish growers in there?
I think
The
it's going to be
farmers
another
that I've
challenge.
the farmers that I've asked recently think that like it's fine. Like, I mean, by now that they know that it can happen, we know that
Mhm.
the first time it happened, it like caused, created a lot of chaos. But I think it sort of depends on if a certain wind comes at a certain tide, I think it can move a lot of sand, which can impact their like bottom cages. And it also flushes more, so there's then less phytoplankton. And I mean, the farms will be fine, but it might change the growth, it might reduce the growth rate. I think sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Um, and therefore, it also should increase the salinity a little bit, which will make the oysters a little bit saltier. So it just changes the product a little bit.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, anybody else? Well, all right. Thank you, ladies. That was great.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you
Yeah.
for going to this conference. It sounds like, we all should be going to conferences about how to save the world, how to fight
I hear
back.
you.
Yeah. And Danielle is just, she kind of touched the tip of the iceberg of all that she does. She's like constantly out there with, taking care of the babies, but she's also running me around to do water quality, and she's running, the state around to do their water quality. And it's just amazing. And I am a member of Tisbury, and the one thing that they did right last year was it was resounding to get Danielle an assistant. Um, it was amazing. Everybody, she was so worried, but people just got up all around and just spoke and supported her and got her an assistant. So it's just awesome that the work that
Yeah,
they do.
a full
And Emma
time.
at the hatchery is just, they've got, it's like the circus juggling. They've got so many things going at all times. So just kudos, guys. I love you. You're wonderful.
Missy Sherry.
That's a
Yeah.
really important part of our little island here.
Yeah, amazing. How is the fishery right now? Is there a lot of fishermen, or is it getting old? Are they dropping out?
Oh, overall, like on a
Yeah.
Yeah, I see like a reduction overall in commercial fishermen in Tisbury. Um, I can only speak to Tisbury. I mean, there's other communities where I see like a lot of young guys getting into.
there's definitely a cohort of younger fishermen, not necessarily, who do work in the shell fisheries, but the other fisheries as well, getting
Mhm.
into conch and lobsters and sea bass and everything else. And that's the thing. I think that full-time fishermen now really have to diversify. Um, they have to be prepared to fish anything that's available. Like my stepson is, what is he, 26?
Yeah.
and he rakes quahogs and oysters out of Eggertown. He goes scalloping, but he's also has a lobster boat and does the conch fishery and sea bass and fluking, like literally everything.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
Yeah.
because any one fishery isn't going to get you there anymore. I don't know if it ever did, but any three fisheries isn't going to pay your bills,
You have to diversify if you're gonna be a like wild harvester.
which takes a lot of skill and a lot of support and a lot of investment.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't
But I
own a
can tell,
home, but he's got a boat payment.
yeah. But I can tell you if you are a quahogger, especially in or a fisherman in Vineyard Haven, quahogging has, if you have the market, it's a steady income. It may
Mhm.
not be huge paychecks, but if you have the market, it can be a steady income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not your only income, but
Yeah, not your only income,
but
but yeah,
a year-round income.
yeah, it could help.
Yeah, it's just like any, agriculture. The people that work so hard in those fields, they don't get paid enough. And every time the prices go up, people start complaining, well, we got to pay more for food if we want to have a supply source of food. It's like, come on.
Well, that's actually something with shellfish we've been talking, and I did have this conversation at the conference with some. They weren't the farmers themselves. More like the support professionals around it. About the price of oysters. When they got into oysters in the mid 90s around here, oysters were worth so much more than quahogs, and the quahog price had stagnated for a couple decades. And now the oyster price has really stagnated. So although we are paying so much more at a restaurant for, half-shelled oysters, the farmers aren't really getting more.
Right.
There's some of the smaller farms who can use the marketing technique of such a limited supply. They might be getting more per piece, but a lot of the other farms just aren't. So they're working just as hard, if not harder. Um, and the cost of everything around them is going up, but the price they're getting isn't. So that's scary and that's alarming. And that's something that we talk
Yeah.
about. We think the Shellfish Group, like we think about what is it that we can do to increase the demand that would actually translate to a better price for the farmers.
We need more lobbyists.
We need more
I think,
lobbyists.
yeah.
Well, all right.
Okay.
If nothing else, thank you all again.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank
Go
you.
outside, enjoy this warm day because it's going down back into the 20s tonight, I
Mm.
Oh
think.
my God.
Thank you very much.
You're
At least the
welcome.
ponds don't
Bravo.
freeze anymore.
Thank you,
Nice to see
Danny.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, Sherry.
Hey, Emma, we
Oh.
definitely have to get together.
I know.
Let me trying to stop the record.
Oh yeah, do that.
Eventually.
I got, oh, right there.